Let's put in this scenario. You walk in this elevator for the first time, and there's someone there with you right now, and they ask you, "What do you do for a living?" What's your elevator pitch about PlayLab?
Wow, that's a tough one. Thank God I'm not in an elevator that often. Um, no, I I say that we're an extremely multidisciplinary creative studio. We make things that we want to make with people that we want to make them with, and that's really the only real tie between everything that we do. But we work across all disciplines, and we chase interest. Um, we try to figure out how to get good at things that we're not good at, and we really try to develop sound relationships with the people around us, because we believe that teamwork is one of the most important things in making anything.
Well, the legend goes that the idea to begin the business came across a getting together with your business partner, and you wrote the business plan on a napkin. Is that true?
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, I mean, that was 20 years ago this year that we used to go to this coffee shop when we were in architecture school called Bolos, and we would draw on napkins. I mean, we were 19, you know, and our friendship blossomed from trying to make each other laugh, trying to make things that were absolutely ridiculous just in the confines of a small napkin. And Jeff drew this one that was like, we moved to New York, we do a lecture, somebody gives us some money and then we die, and it was like the idea being that, hey, we're committed at 19 years old. We're committed to this idea of PlayLab. Let's go see how far we can take it. And so it's been a constant, we don't draw on napkins anymore. We draw in other ways, but we check in with each other every day. And PlayLab is truly the adventure of Archie and Jeff, but as it's grown, it's become the adventure of anybody that's under the roof of PlayLab. And so we take that roof extremely seriously. And so I'm making these large scale paintings. We just moved into this new office that we've been building for the past few months. And I'm making these large scale paintings of the original napkins. I'm blowing them up to this massive size so that we can put them in all the conference rooms as sort of like a reminder to ourselves when we're in those rooms that it took a long time to get into this room, But yes, the legend is true.
The legend is true. Do you still have the napkin?
Yes, sir. It's on my desk.
There you go.
Yeah.
Lovely. The interesting thing is when you begin a business and you were so young, both of you, normally you try to follow a blueprint or someone that came before you, an inspiration, an idea. For both of you, what was that?
In architecture school, we had a library in this building called Kogel. And that doesn't sound novel, but for us at 19, I mean, it's not like I was going to libraries and just kind of sifting through books when I was a teenager. So we went to this library and we would just bring stacks of books back to our desks. And there were so many things we just didn't know. I mean, we were so impressionable and we were so naive, and we just didn't, we had discovered the Charles and Ray Eames office in the library. I mean, we just didn't know what it was, right? And then we found a book on this firm called Carlson Wilker that had been founded by a designer, Jan Wilker, and Hjalti Carlson, a German and an Icelandic designer. And that year, I bought my first flight and flew to New York and knocked on the door of Carlson Wilker, and I just wanted to meet them. And they became long-term friends. I mean, we're extremely close friends to this day. But they enabled us to kind of, they asked us, like, why are you asking permission? Because we went to the office and we're asking all these questions. And they were like, well, don't ask for permission. There's like maybe there's a risk of failure, but who cares? You have a privileged position to even consider doing this sort of thing for a living. Just try it. And so we had met one of our heroes, and they turned out to be extremely kind people, which we learned over time is rare, actually, in the world, but definitely in this business. And it gave us this fuel to go ahead and do what we wanted to do, or at least we didn't know what we wanted to do. We just to take a step forward. You know what I mean? So Carlson Wilker really was that for us, and remains that for us.
I love the idea that you just decided to knock on someone's door and say, "Hey, by the way, I'm a fan." This isn't something that perhaps we don't see as often anymore. Is
Mm.
that personality trait that you currently have is still part of who you are? Are you still that guy, the 19-year-old who wants to meet someone or has an admiration for somebody else that will reach out and say, "Hey, this is how I feel. This is what I want you to know about me and what I'm doing."
Yes, sir. Yeah. I mean, I grew up that way. My dad always taught me to sort of ask questions and to not be afraid. So I get that from him for sure, and my mom. Um, but I think that, you know, just as like a person, I'm self conscious, I'm anxious, I have so many things going on in my brain. And when you find people that are like minded, and then they're empathetic or they're kind or they're open or they're graceful, it gives you this feeling of like confidence or comfort, or even if it's scary, it gives you, yeah, a sense of belonging. And that we know the power of that, right? And we also understand that we are extremely privileged people. So what Carlson Wilker taught me and all that experience leading up to that was to try to do our best to treat everybody that way. And so we sort of have a rule at the studio because of Carlson Wilker. If somebody reaches out and they want to meet, right? Not just people looking for a job or something, which is different, but somebody that's interested or curious because they found that PlayLab provided something to them and they wanted to come by the studio or talk to somebody on the phone or whatever, we say yes every time. And we do that. And I meet with, a lot of people every week, short little sprints to make sure that we're responding to people in that way, because we know what that feeling feels like and what access looks like and opportunity looks like. And we know that from relationships are born all these incredible opportunities. And a lot of the people that have reached out, they've become connection points or collaborators in best cases. And so yeah, it's a thing that's innate in what Jeff and I believe with this place.
Do you think if in a different universe, if that conversation with Carson was a little bit different, if they were so welcoming and so excited for you, that how would you choose a different path? Would that derail both of you from you pursuing your goal?
It's a really good question, and I've thought about that before. And I mean, I think that Jeff and I are ultimately extremely positive people, bordering on naive. Um, and so we would have found energy in another way. Um, I think especially at that time, being 19, it's when your brain is like literally scientifically forming at this time, and
Yeah.
it's not fully set in its ways. So it was open, and we lacked any fear. I mean, financially, we did have fear, but for some reason, we were just so energized by the belief of what was possible between Jeff and I. And we had no proof other than our conversations or the things we were interested in. Literally no proof, right? And so I'm a musician, and I write a lot of music. And I wrote this song where I say, I, I'm always looking for a sign, right? And I say I was born that way. And I do. I definitely romanticize symbols. And Carlson Wilker became a symbol for us. So I think we would have found that symbol in other ways. And I think over the past 20 years, which is crazy to say that, but over the past 20 years, we've met the opposite of people, right? That um, are driven by some other sort of ego or negativity or competition that isn't a good sort of competition or whatever. And that teaches us symbolically in a different direction, right? I think we were taught in design school that part of the power of design is for the designer, in quotes, to know what sort of information to take in and use. Your brain acts as a filter. You need to be open to sort of everything that's coming through, but you decide what actually is going to be useful for, you know, whatever purpose is in front of you. And so I think good, bad, everything in between, they're all just examples and symbols. And ultimately, the only thing that we can control, which is not other people or other people's actions, is our own. And so we are carefully considering always what we say and what we do and how we go about it. Um, and try to do our best to build boundaries to protect ourselves from the things that we know are not going to be beneficial to that. And that's like the part of design that they really don't teach you in school. That's sort of like a trial by fire thing, which we're still in the middle of. I mean, Jeff and I have a long lens. In the beginning, Jeff and I are the same person and also polar opposite people. And I come with a lot of energy. I talk a lot. I know that. Sometimes it gets me in trouble. And I come, with this bombastic sort of energy. He said once in a lecture, he was like, the analogy is, if it weren't for him, we'd be driving this train and it would have gone off the rails a long time ago. But if it weren't for me, maybe he wouldn't have even got on the train, sort of thing. And that's it's not a one-to-one, but it's a really decent analogy for that, So yeah, it's a strange adventure that we're trying to figure out. But this long lens is, we have another 60 years, and we're trying to build an environment, an ecosystem, a belief system that has the ability to realize anything creatively over that period of time. Because I have this energy, I used to say, I want to do everything all the time. I used to say that, everything all the time. Music, and let's do film, let's do this. And I think as I got older, and then with Jeff's advice, he was like, look, it's not everything all the time. It's anything over time. So let's focus on sustainability and longevity and health and wellness, which means a ton of things in the context of a creative studio, and ask ourselves the tough questions and then do our best to chip away at that over time. And so that's what we're committed to. It's changed a little bit because we know more as we get older, but the core idea and the principle of this place has never changed. And that's what feels good every day.
See, I feel like for a dynamic duo to be successful in the creative world, you needed the instigator and the facilitator. That's how I usually describe when I meet people. For example, my wife and I the same thing. We work together, we have a business together. I'm the instigator, she's the facilitator. But the more and more I observe and I talk to people who are starting practices or business, as with the partner, there's always that dynamic, and one kind of push each other in a way to, hopefully in the right path. Do you think this is more or less the dynamic that you have with Jeff?
100%. 100%.
Let me guess, you the instigator.
100%. I've learned to become facilitator minded and more focused on facilitation. He's brilliant. I mean, I think Jeff is a genius, but he has this attention to detail and care for the craft of what we're doing and the process of what we're doing. And he takes it as ridiculous as that human being is, and as much fun as he has doing it, he takes it extremely seriously. And I don't take that for granted, right? Because I bring things to the table that I'm interested in. So does he. And for me, nothing ever seems impossible, ever. And so we have pretty ridiculous conversations in this place. And him, with the incredible team that we have here, strategize and develop plans to get to those goals. And that is the absolute best part, because having a great idea or having a vision, it's like, great, that's great, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is actualizing those ideas and doing it in a way that is not brutal or draining or, every single thing that we do has a roadblock or a bumper rail or a speed bump or whatever your analogy is. It's difficult. It's sort of, we are not committed to making a business that's easy for ourselves. That's not the goal of this place. It would be so much easier to come in here every day and do the same thing every day and just get good at that one thing. And economies of scale, be way more profitable doing that. It's not what Jeff and I on this earth are interested in. We want to see what us in this team is capable of always. And we want to be better. We want the individuals to be better. We want us to be better, and we want the whole to be better. It's the thing that we can control. So yeah, it does require this intense facilitation on both of our parts, but he's the leader in that. I mean, absolutely, his analogy of the train is correct. When we started talking about incorporating and health insurance or taxes, he took the sword from the stone on that one. I was scared when that became a reality, when rubber hit the road, and he took it with grace. And thankfully, over time, he's been able to build up a successful foundation for a business around us. So now that we have operations teams and administrative teams in the studio, which is a blessing, that's off the backs of what he built. And we have like an analogy here because Disney is our North Star always, right? Sort of like the most creative company in the world, and animation and characters and building worlds and experiences, and as it is for a lot of creative people. But we have this joke internally: who's Walt here and who's Roy? And I think Jeff is just both, ultimately. And I gave him a speech I wrote. I was coming back from a trip and about a year ago, and I sat him down. I was like, I gave him this long emotional speech. It was very hard to get through, and about the future of the studio and what I believed and what I wanted to do and with him. And I called him Walt, and he was like, no, you're Walt. I'm Roy. And I was like, well, that's what's going to make this partnership really fun over the next 60 years is, it's going to just be ping ponging back and forth. Who's Walt? Who's Walt? Who's Roy? But ultimately, I do believe he's just both. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'm here to see what comes out of your brain and what we can get done together. I'm here in service, and I think we're both in service to each other. And I think that's what makes the partnership extremely interesting. I trust him ultimately and indefinitely. And that level of trust I don't have in anyone in my life other than my wife, and my parents. But yeah, it's about this sort of like unshakable trust and devotion to what is and what can be together.
That's beautiful. Love to hear that as well. Was that the first time you meet each other? Was that immediately connection in terms of like, I love that guy. He's great. We're gonna get along perfectly. Was it right away?
Yeah, it's emotional for me. I could cry thinking about it, which I'm known to do. I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday. And we had this amazing professor, Jay Stokel, second year architecture school. That's when we met, 19. And I mean, everything was polar opposite. Our music taste, the way we dress, how we grew up. All of those things. But we had this connection point over absolute humor and irreverence, and which is, I don't know where it came from with him, maybe being, the youngest child in the family or something. But for me, it was like a punk and hardcore music background growing up in Virginia Beach, Virginia, skate and surf and just being absolute poser. But I was just around really talented skaters and stuff. But yeah, we just joked. And that connective tissue was like, oh man, because architecture school is so serious. Designers are so serious, and it was so stiff. And that's why we went to bolos and drew on napkins. It was sort of like, let's go off campus and get away from this shit. And I think that together, it was like, boom. And then you realize like there was a freedom. There was this complete freeing interchange between each other. And one of the drawings that I'm drawing or reproducing these napkins on the wall, there's one that he drew when we were 19. And he's such a good illustrator, right? This is why I think he's Walt, one of the many reasons. And he drew this guy with a beard and a flannel shirt. And he was holding a giant log. And then we would do a thing where we would draw something, and then we would draw a thought bubble and fill in the thought. And he wrote in there, yes, I do throw logs for money. And that became symbolic because it was like our parents were like, what do you guys do? And like now it's like we make pretty ridiculous things. And so our parents know what we do, but it's still confusing to somebody from that generation that didn't have that sort of line of work or whatever. So yeah, we do throw logs for money. It's like, it's a ridiculous, somebody paying somebody to throw a log. And then in 2014, we were moving out of a studio in Brooklyn, And some artist was getting rid of all this still life material. And on the staircase to donate all this stuff was a log. And we saved it. And so we have it. And we've designed a plinth for it to sit on in the front of the space. So it's symbols. It's like, it's signs. It's like, but yeah, I'm trailing now. But yeah, I remember.
I love it. Are you actively looking for symbols when trying to make decisions about projects or in life in general, or they kind of usually find a way to manifest itself in front of you?
I think it's the latter. There's more trouble than it's worth sometimes. No, I'm not looking for them, but they definitely find me. You know, it's like a nugget where it sticks to your skull, and then you're like, I cannot remove that now. But no, those symbols are sort of everywhere.
You earlier talked about one of the main missions of the PlayLab is not only about the relationship, it's of course about the relationship, but also do good work, do better work. How do you define better? What's better for you?
That's a great question, man. We've been talking about this over the past couple of weeks a lot. I think better is an understanding that not even critical of yourself or some shortcoming or inabilities or failures, but sort of seeing what's possible and the capacity that we have, which is like not just the creative ability to design, is how you go about it, how you communicate, how you recognize things in yourself that just could be better. And there's a multitude of things that we discuss in this studio. And some are social or equity driven. Some of those are process driven. Communication is a really key one. I think a lot gets lost when you don't communicate or you communicate improperly. One conversation we're always having here is like, we don't want to lose the magic and the idealism of, especially the early days of PlayLab, which was a much more fly by the seat of your pants punk thing. Everybody has issues with becoming more buttoned up or whatever. And so a lot of the work that we have to do, especially at the director level here, is to assure people that structure and process and these things that we know are going to be helpful for us, it's not to become something we're not. It's to actually get better at the thing that we already are. And there's a careful consideration of process here. And it's not perfect at all. And we open the door for feedback all the time here. We want to be better at it. We want to know what everybody thinks. And we're not even good at asking them what they think half the time. And so, but we recognize it and we're just getting better at it. And I think that's the thing that Jeff and I have a meeting, because there's so many meetings going on. We have a partners meeting that's just an hour dedicated every week with no agenda, just me and him to talk about anything we want related to the studio. And so a lot of these things surface then where we're, working through projects or talking with team members, and we're realizing things about the studio and bringing it back to the table and then problem solving it. And that's design as well. Nobody taught us that. Nobody told us that that's what running a studio was going to be like. But I, in particular, are very excited about that and kind of committed to trying to figure out how to continuously and consistently make this thing better. Again, not doing it in a brutal way or turning the wheel too fast, but slowly but surely building a place that is better.
A company with such a strong DNA, with this very clear ecosystem that both of you have been creating the last 20 years, how are you making sure that not only the projects, but also the people that join the team, it's aligned with that vision? It's really it comes in, it just makes sense to them to be involved, either, as I mentioned, perhaps as someone who just recently hired or a director or someone, intern, whatever it is, but also in terms of projects and collaboration.
It's so hard, man. I think Jeff and I understand and realize that at the end of the day, like, we own this company 50-50. There are no other partners. There's no investment. It's me and him. At the end of the day, when we go home at night, we're the ones fiscally and long-term responsible for this place. And we realize that. So we realize we have a different level of incentive, right? Because we have ownership quite literally. And it's not even about finances. It's literally about the idea of ownership. So we recognize that. And we've worked hard over time to build up a place that we're proud of and always getting better, of compensating across the board in a multitude of ways for the time that these amazing people put in to realize these projects. We try to make it extremely clear that the no particular focus or no goal is the thing here, right? It's not any sort of level of fame or, comments, or press or whatever. It's literally the process of being here together and seeing what we can achieve when we previously had not achieved that thing. That's what the whole thing is, which ladders down to team structure and team growth. One thing that we're doing here too is identifying growth paths for everybody so that people know where they can be next and what they need to do to get there, because we need them there and we want them to be better. Because back to the fact that Jeff and I are not leaving this place, but anybody else can leave this place. And if they go out into the world, we've had a lot of people come through PlayLab and, for the first 20 years, making a lot of mistakes. And so very thankful for the amount of people that have come through here and spent time with us and dreamed with us and designed with us and spent long hours trying to get things right. But we know that at the end of the day, they may leave. And if they do, we want them to be better people, designers, and have learned something and have felt that, while they were here, that was a really exciting time and a growth time, right? I want that for myself. I want it for the organization, and I want it for each individual. So it's something that we're getting better at, really just in the past year. If I'm being honest, like we're talking about it a lot. We're putting plans together and we're actualizing those plans, and even just building out this beautiful space. It's the first time in 20 years that we've designed our own space that we don't share with anybody, and it's a place that we can make ours. So we've designed it. The team has designed it. We're designing furniture. We're literally making artwork specifically for this place. So that it's trying to figure out what allows everybody to feel and know that they're a part of a thing that isn't just, it's not me and Jeff, it's whoever is here at that moment. And making sure people feel like, that they're heard and seen in the process of making these things. And not easy. Is the more and more people, we're 12 people right now. It's, that if you told me in 2004 we'd have 12 people here, I would be like, that is so scary. And so I want everybody that I work with on my project teams, and even the ones that are not, to feel like I'm very thankful for the things that they're doing. And that even when I'm like giving feedback of like, no, we could push this here, and what if we tried this, and have you thought about this, that that's all out of becoming better. The project being better, them being better, me being better as a director, all of those things. It's a complex web, and it requires you to take it seriously and think about it all the time. I said a joke to Jeff the other day. I was like, am I just too serious about this stuff? And he's like, no, this is what we use, kind of the job. You're the president of PlayLab, literally on paper. So you got it. That is your job. Just take it seriously. So I like taking it seriously.
You early in the conversation, you said it twice about you're coming from a place of privilege, and you mentioned privilege a couple times. Can you give an example what you meant by that?
I think that, definitely being white and male in America, for sure, that's top. I've been learning a lot about that within myself and the country. I think very specifically, I grew up with a family that believed in me. I think that is an immense amount of privilege. I grew up in a middle-class environment, that upper middle-class environment that afforded me the opportunity to go to college without student loans. So when I went to college to dream and about PlayLab and have these conversations about Carlson Wilker, I wasn't physically logging into an account and paying my dorm room fees or tuition or food. That was something that was provided by my mom and dad. My dad, in particular, working extremely hard over a very long period of time to get to a place. And he would tell us that we were privileged. Like, he would tell us in a positive way. It's like, hey, there's many ways that you could not be in this position. And so we had that sort of language growing up, but that evolved for me over time. When I graduated and I moved to New York, and Jeff and I started PlayLab more formally and got a studio space and all that was on me. And, I didn't have support when I left the doors of college. And that was also an amazing privilege too, because my dad had me working starting in 9th grade, washing dishes at the seafood restaurant until 2 a.m. during the school year. And, that's how he kind of grew up. He had like 3 different jobs, no dad, 4 kids, 3 of them living in an attic with no insulation or no heat in the winter, that sort of thing. And like those stories stuck with me. And so he had me working, and I really enjoyed working. It gave me a sense of confidence and purpose. And I'm a little bit of a busybody, so and it enabled me to grow people skills, especially when I started waiting tables. And I had a flower delivery. I was a staff at a flower delivery place that only delivered flowers to funeral homes. So I had a liaison for a year with, funeral directors. And, I worked at a Dairy Queen for a year. I worked at 7-Eleven during college while I was doing architecture school. For additional money, I worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift during the school year. And I lived with Jeff at the time, so I would leave at night and he'd go to sleep and I'd come back in the morning, and then we'd go to class. And it was a pretty strange time, but I wanted to feel that. I wanted to know that. And so that's part of what I mean with privilege. And then even now, like thinking about moments in our life or in the history of the career of the studio that we're extremely lucky and blessed to have been a part of, at the top of that list being able to meet and collaborate with Virgil Abloh and get to know the type of person that he was and what that did for us. We're very aware of that privilege of having been able to have it, even one conversation with that person. Mm-hmm. So I think when I say that, I mean it. In my mind, there are a multitude of definitions inside of that word that I'm continually exploring.
Is your dad still with us?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you guys had the chance to, I'm sure you have, but how has been the conversation about him looking at you today after all these years, being able to accomplish, at least most of your goals, being successful in your craft and in being able to be, for what I can tell from far away, a decent human being?
Yeah, thank you. He's extremely proud. Both of my parents, they are extremely proud. And we talk, I talk to my mom every day, talk to my dad once a week. We're on a more text-based relationship. He's a quieter man, but I get my emotional side definitely from him. Both of them, but definitely my dad. And we talk a lot more about it now. And yeah, he writes me these very long emails, very long text messages out of the blue that will be like, hey, I was thinking about you. And there's this level of pride with him that he sees the full perspective. It's not like, oh man, I saw that big giant skate ramp that PlayLab made for Vans. Like, mm-hmm. My dad's not like, he's excited about those things, of course. He's excited about the way that Jeff and I are going about it. That's what he's really excited about. And he's very, there are highlights like, Post Malone. We've been doing creative direction for 3 albums for Austin Post, and also an incredible human being, and his team is incredible. My dad likes Post Malone, and so when you have a crossover of something where he's like, oh, I listened to that in my car, and I'm taking him to see Post in October in our hometown, And I think that's going to be a really powerful moment, but it's not really about those things. He even was like, you don't have to take me. You don't have to worry about me. Don't worry about me. He's like very like selfless in that way. Um, but he's a maker. He's brilliant. And I think it's the type of thing where it's like, he could never imagine this for me, but this is what he would have imagined for me, is doing what I love, trying to get better at it. He left me, when I was growing up, I had a marble plaque on my desk, and it just said, think. And that's always what he reinforced, which is he would always point to his head. He was my tennis coach. I played tennis aggressively growing up, and he would be like, it's this, just think through it. And then his secondary advice always was, or is, there is a solution to every problem. And so with my son, who's also named Archie, and my dad's name is Archie, we teach him that. And so he says that. So when he gets in his head and he's 7 years old and he'll be frustrated about something, I'm like, what do we say? And he goes, there's a solution to every problem.
That's funny. I have small kids too, and I have an 11-year-old, and
Oh,
even my youngest, I tell them there's no problem, only solutions.
yeah, same. Yeah, exactly the same. And it's
So
true.
kind of rephrasing the same thing, but kind of embed it on their head. So sometimes when they come home, "Oh, I had a problem," and I look at them like, I know, no problem, only solutions.
This morning I was trying to get to the studio so I could not be late for you. And
Mm.
he wasn't getting dressed. He wouldn't get his clothes on. And he's like, I don't want to go to school. And then I'm like, buddy, I sat down with him. I was like, we gotta go. Just let's do it. And then he goes, today's such a bad day. And I was like, why is it a bad day? Let's look at everything. Let's look at the perspective. So we just talked about everything. And then he was like, you're right. It's just daily effort. And it's the same for me and my brain, right? So I'm empathetic towards it. But
See, you come across as someone who's very open and sincere about your feelings. So far, you've been able to share everything I have asked you without any hesitation whatsoever. Were there occasions that kind of backfire, that perhaps you were just too open, too honest in the business environment on a personal level, that you wish you were a little bit more, reserved?
I think that I wrote about this in a song recently too, but I realize I talk a lot, and part of it is that what's the harm? And I really do trust people. I prefer to start with trust, right? And if that's taken away or broken, especially if it's broken consistently, my boundaries go up, right? And I've learned that lesson over time. So I don't regret ever being open emotionally or whatever. I think it's really important to speak and to share these things with the people that you care about. And, I realized that, like, in running this type of business and working with people in a multitude of industries where money is involved and sometimes ego, but definitely vision and creative stuff, which is amorphous and nuanced and all this stuff, that it can be difficult, right? And so Jeff and I, the way that we approach projects is that we throw ourselves into the relationship. We throw ourselves into the thing. We really care about it. And we tell client, collaborator, whatever, what we actually think. Doesn't always go well. So we've tried to consistently course correct how we deliver things, or how we defend things or position things. But the only thing that we have is the ability as PlayLab to literally give our perspective. It's a service, but the difference is that we cannot back down on what our perspective is, right? And so we will continually drive that home, because we have to be convicted of that. It's a true conviction. It's something that we take extremely seriously. So in my professional life, yeah, I mean, I definitely get emotional and I get vulnerable and I get upset. I get angry sometimes, and I have to figure out constantly, all of us do, and a lot of that is just, it's a good thing to care, and how you handle that care is the thing that has to be constantly studied and edited and changed. But no, I don't regret being openly emotional or vulnerable with people. I do regret, if I had a wrong perspective at a time, and that's happened in the past for sure, and I learned from that, and do my best for the right relationships, state where I was wrong. But that's, again, because I take it so seriously.
I want to switch gear quickly and talk a little bit about design overall, because it's such a big concept when we talk about design, and we're covering so many different subjects and so on. But lately, I want to talk to people. There's a lot of big push about design being a tool for social change.
Mhm.
Do you believe that that's a job, truly a job for a designer who has a capability to drive social change, or there are really limitations in what you can achieve?
I mean, I think both. Yeah, I think both. I think that, yeah, everybody has a sort of definition about that, but I think absolutely that is a role. That is a role of everything that we do. It's sort of like we talk about, like, let's say branding a lot when we do like branding for clients, collaborations. No matter what you do, somebody sees you as something. It has an effect, basically. Anything that you do has an effect. And so that's what I mean when we're analyzing the way we're going about things here, the decisions we're making and bringing in certain projects or working with certain people, or what the output of those things are. And a lot of it, we look towards this team and the makeup of this team and how we focus on starting here really small, and then outwardly how we're having conversations, sometimes really tough conversations. Um, it is a thing that wasn't necessarily fully on our radar until 2020, and has
Hmm.
consistently grown to become a focus. You know, um, when we started, it was this small piece of like, is this our role? When we were really young and starting, and I'm talking like 2009, starting PlayLab in Greensboro, Alabama, was a massive learning lesson for us. Um, but yeah, that's something that we're constantly discussing here, and it's nuanced, and there are very specific relationships where we're very focused, you know, on
What are
trying to
some of
figure out.
the teams that you feel like you're most focused on?
I mean, without getting into specific names,
Hmm.
they're professional and personal relationships in our ecosystem that um, that we're in constant dialogue with on these issues, you know, um, and then internally too, you know.
If you take a macro look at the industry overall, the design, the creative industry, is there anything specific that you see that you perhaps don't enjoy? I don't want to say trends, but things that are moving in a direction that perhaps you would like to see going, completely the opposite, or the other way around, or situations that are changing the generation, how they're moving forward, and that you're excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody within the studio would have a different answer on that. Me personally, I don't focus on that, and not as a cop out. I just don't. I don't think about what's wrong with an industry. I don't even actually look at the industry. I'm not really concerned with the industry. I think it goes back to being extremely focused on what we're doing here. Um, it's like when I think about this with music a lot. It's like since I'm becoming more and more devoted in time around producing music, I listen to my intricate mixes more than I listen to other music. You know what I mean? So I'm not really like thinking about what's happening in music in that way.
Hmm.
Even when we work with artists, it's sort of like we're not trying to change genre or change um, competition between artists or something. We're building worlds with artists and around artists, and trying to develop access points to those artists where there's some genuine amazing thing that's worth celebrating. And so that's how we look at the studio too. So when we look at the industry, definitely everybody in the studio has different levels of focus on what's happening in the industry. Like we get that question a lot about AI or whatever, and it's like that everything's a tool and everything is like possible. It's like take in all that information and figure out what you're going to do. But I don't sit and sort of catalog what's not working or what is wrong. I mean, that's like an overstatement. I definitely look at it, but like, I'm not thinking about it from a design perspective.
Mm. I'm curious about the music aspect. How long have you been composing and creating music?
I've been playing music since I was a kid. I was in, bands in high school. And then when I got to college, around the time PlayLab was started, I was really focused on songwriting and performing out live. Jeff and I created a band in which I wrote the music, and then we would perform live with a fake band, and I would sing it. Um, and that was just really fun. I mean, I grew up in sort of punk bands and around much better musicians than me, and I wasn't really writing a ton. When I got to college, I started writing really aggressively, and then once I graduated college, PlayLab was so all-consuming that I didn't focus on music until 2010, when I became obsessed with software called Ableton Live. It's a DAW, and I just became really immersed in creating music every day. But I always felt that until now that I hadn't earned the right to kind of do that because PlayLab was not at the place that I wanted it to be yet, and it still isn't. But I think that I kind of 2021 things started to change where I was like, you care about this, Archie. You want to spend time doing it. You have to make other sacrifices in your personal time to gain the 10,000 hours that, like Virgil would say, of getting better at something. And so I became more immersed in DJing and understanding record box and organizing my USB stick and trying to put myself in uncomfortable environments to DJ live, understand different types of CDJs, different types of mixing units. And then my production started getting better. And then I started sharing music with people. And then I started producing music with people. And it just took hold. And so now we have, I have two full lengths and an EP, and one will probably surface in the next 4 weeks. But there's this massive full length that I've been building and just finished mastering that the studio is designing right now. They actually present to me at 2:00, and it's the first time I've ever been in the position of like client in a certain way. And Anna and Dylan, who are senior design directors here and have been with us the longest, have been collaborating directly together on presenting a vision for this album that I've finished. That it's really weird to say. It's really,
How exciting, though.
it's very exciting. It's exciting. I love, 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 love music. Just love it. Love it, love it, love it.
Now, if you were to create a playlist of the last 20 years of PlayLab, what some of the musics would have been there?
When we started, we were listening to a lot of Frou Frou, Imogen Heap,
Hmm.
music producer and vocalist. We were listening to this Spoon record, Gimme Fiction, a lot. Gorillas, I think about like the first year of PlayLab, Gorillas. We were listening to Gorillas all the time, kind of as a group. And like that was like a feeling. I mean, as the studio has grown, we've obviously worked with musicians. So there's a lot of that happening in the studio all the time. But then, ironically, Jeff is not focused on listening to music, not like I am. So I probably have a separate playlist other than those early days of like what we listened to at that time. But yeah, there's a lot of Post Malone being played in this office right now. Um,
That's amazing. Archie, before I let you go, there's three questions that we ask everybody who
yeah.
comes to the show, and is recommendations. So we want you to recommend us a book. It can be something that you read recently or one of your favorites. Usually we ask someone to recommend us a movie, TV show, but in your case, perhaps you can recommend us something to listen to.
To listen to.
And
Yeah, I love it.
yeah, And then last but not least, I guess, who should we invite to be here on the show next?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's start there. You know,
Okay.
because what types of, is it creative minded? Is it like, what types of people do you want to talk with?
It's creative and minded. We have anything, everything from musicians coming up. We have filmmakers. We have architects, designers. We have all aspect in the field of creativity. We really assume, as you mentioned, you're someone who is interested in multitude of different domains and interests that go beyond just what do you do. So we
Yeah.
want to talk to people that kind of have the same mindset.
Yeah. I mean, the people that immediately come to mind are Reese Cooper. He's a friend and a fashion designer here in Los Angeles that we collaborate and have been collaborating with for 5 years. He's brilliant and such a good conversation, so educational. Um, we have a friend, Nico Fern at Nike, who is also absolutely brilliant, um, kind, empathetic, creative person. Um, I'm going to follow up with a big list because I have tons in mind
Excellent.
for you. And then listen to, I think, one that sticks out to me is Arthur Russell. I think about Arthur Russell all the time. He died in the 90s. He was this iconic multi-instrument, instrument person that played cello, but also created new types of country music and disco music, and just a phenomenal story. There's a documentary uh, on his life that is really worth watching, called Wild Combination. Um, yeah, they joke me in the studio because I listen to Arthur Russell quite frequently. Um, and then I would say go in deep on the work of this African artist, Ebo Taylor. Ebo
Mm.
Taylor, I listen to almost every day, in our house. Like when I get home, my wife and I put on Ebo Taylor, um, and it's a vibe.
What about book?
Book. Um, I forget the name of it, but it's Jim Henson's biography. Is what Jeff and I are currently reading simultaneously together, and it's a fascinating story about the growth of an office, the imagination of one, the failures of teams, and the joys of teams, and um, you know, he reads a lot in sort of understanding how to be better here at the studio. He just finished the Tim Burton biography, which is fascinating because we're very interested in film at the moment, in video and storytelling and character development and narrative arcs and all these things. So he wanted to know what Tim Burton's approach was, and um, but those two books kind of come immediately to mind.
Archie, I want to thank you for taking the time. It's been so joyful. I always often say that I got to be lucky to spend at least an hour with some amazing creative people and have the opportunity to asking questions that I'm interested in, very selfishly. And I do hope that with that, the audience, the people that are listening or watching, can resignate and walk away with some bits of information that can make their journey perhaps a little easier, a little better, a little smoother. Because we know it's a lot of bump in the road, but at the end of the day, is the determination needs, the fire needs to be burning to make sure they can see things come through. And I think this conversation would be a major hit that people will walk away with tons of great things here. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for the time.